No, it's fine. What can be said about Adi Shankara? Anything you say will fall short of what he was. So I thought I will make a few points here. One, if you look at the scholars, the academicians, etc., they all talk about Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. It is not Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta is the message of the Pramana, the Upanishad. But Shankara propounded it so beautifully through his bhashyas and independent works that any writer or philosopher or spiritual teacher who came after him, whether they agreed with him or disagreed with him, had to quote him. There are schools of thought that don't agree with him, but they have to quote him. There are traditional teachers in the parampara who are 100% in agreement with him, who is taking his parampara forward. They also have to quote him, because he enjoys such a huge presence there. Therefore, many scholars and academicians especially started calling it Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, Ramanuja's Vishishta Advaita, and Madhavacharya's Dvaita. No, these were three great teachers in three different schools, that's all. But the fact remains that if you look at all the bhashyams written by the different three teachers, and this even academicians and scholars are in agreement with, that the most logical and holistic bhashya is that which belongs to Adi Shankara. Even scholars of Dvaita or Vishishta Dvaita who don't agree with him are constrained to give this, to acknowledge this point, that he has looked at it more holistically than anyone else has. Of course, to really understand the glory of Shankara, you have to study the bhashyas, especially his Brahma Sutra bhashyas. There was a great teacher called Kumarila Bhatta, who was a Mimamsaka, a Karmata, who believed that moksha comes through karma. And he was a great scholar, debater, and when Shankara went to him for a debate, to avoid Guru Droha, this man was literally cooking himself to his death. I don't want to go into the whole story of how and where and why some other time. So that time he tells Shankara, please read out your introduction to your bhashyas. And Shankara reads out the Adhyasa bhashya, which will be only a few pages. If you put in a foolscap page, maybe 3-4 pages, that's all. And this scholar is so impressed by it, he says, Nashto Moha, my delusion is gone. This is such a profound work that we can write 10,000 verses expounding these few pages. Can you imagine the profundity? 10,000 verses. Gita is only 700 verses, just to put it in perspective. Gita is 700 verses, and this man is saying 10,000 verses can be written to explain your introduction to the Shankara Bhashya on the Brahma Sutras, the Adhyasa Bhashya it is known. In fact, I would say no study of Vedanta is complete without doing the Adhyasa Bhashya and the Chatusutri. That's what we follow in our ashram. Another misnomer is that, especially modern Vedanta, that Shankara was born in the 8th century. It's more or less the accepted date. But there was a scholar in Ramakrishna Mission who many years ago published a book which is based on Shankara Digvijayam. There in the introduction, he has talked about the possibility of many dates of Shankara depending on astrological science, historical science, who has quoted his works, etc., scholarly work, which says it could have been as far back as 1st century BC. So even though we say 8th century, don't take it as though it's cast in stone, okay? It is generally accepted 8th century. But the fact is, it could have been as far back as 1st century BC, because some writers at that time have quoted some of his works. So where did they get that quote from? So no one knows for sure, okay? But yeah, generally we will say 1200 years ago. That's one thing. Another thing that is talked about is Shankara is Mayavadi. Shankara is not Mayavadi, he is Brahmavadi, okay? He is Brahman and his Vada is Brahman, not Maya. He has not introduced the term Maya. He has not invented the term Maya. He has only explained it well, profoundly. Maya is a term that is used in the Veda. And I don't mean the girl next door, okay? So, it is a term used in the Maya. Indro Maya Bihi Bhurupam Eti iti. Yeah. Indra, the Lord Brahman, through Maya, has manifested all these forms. It is mentioned there. Yes, Shankara explained it, okay, in manifold ways, very profoundly. Therefore, it's a mistaken notion that Maya was introduced by Shankara. No. Maya was explained beautifully, very profoundly by Shankara. That is true. Okay. By Bhagavan Shankara, we should actually say, but out of our love and fondness for him. After all, we are Anugayis of Shankara. Now, Swamini also mentioned that he established 4 mathas. All of us are really speaking spin-off from that. Whether you are talking about Ramakrishna Mission, Chinmaya Mission, Arsha Vidya Foundation, we don't have an organization, but the Arsha Acharyas, all of us are spin-offs. And that you will know from your surname. Let us take, for example, Chinmaya Mission. Swami Chinmayananji was Chinmayananda Saraswati. Why? Because he took sannyasa from Swami Shivananda Saraswati. So by association, all are part of the Sringeri Kanchi Sampradaya. So are we, because we have diverged from Chinmaya Mission in some ways, but the parampara is the same. Parampara is the same. Nobody can deny, whatever you want to say or do, that Swami Dayananji had taken sannyasa from Swami Chinmayananji. Irrefutable facts. So the Sringeri Parampara flows through all of us. Kanchi is included into that. So if you look at it, anywhere, even those who belong to akhadas, they are connected Akhadas, there are some who belong to the Dvaita Sampradaya, etc. But all the Advaita Akhada are spin-offs from the 4 mathas he established, because they will have names like Giri, Puri, Saraswati, Bharati. Like for example, Akhada wise, we all will come in Niranjan Akhada. Okay. Yeah. In Niranjan Akhada predominantly with Saraswatis. Yeah. Most of the sadhus are known as Saraswati, because it's supposed to be a very scholarly Akhada also. So that is another thing. Another myth that people talk about Shankara is he is Nirishwaravadi. There is no Ishvara in Advaita Vedanta. This is a modern myth. Ishvara mat ko mat pakdo, Brahman ko pakdo. Neither Vyasa nor Shankara supports that view, because Vyasa defining Brahman in the second sutra, after saying Athato Brahma Jignasa, defining Brahman, he doesn't say Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahman. He says Janmadhyaste Yataha Yasmat Karnat Asya Jagataha Janmasthiti Bhangaha. From which cause this creation has come about, this manifestation has come about, is sustained and is resolved. Therefore, he gives Ishvara's definition, what is popularly known as Ishvara's definition for Brahman. And Shankara also explains it in the same manner. He doesn't look upon Ishvara and Brahman as 2 separate realities. If he doesn't look upon Jiva and Ishvara as 2 separate realities, how can he look upon Ishvara and Brahman as 2 separate realities? Or how can he deny Ishvara? And you can challenge, from scholarship standpoint, you can challenge whether it was Shankara who wrote all the sutrams. It is subject to challenge. Though popular minds have attributed many of the sutras to Adi Shankara, I personally also don't think that every one of them has been written by Adi Shankara himself. So that can be challenged. But you can never challenge the fact he established the Shanmata form of worship. That is irrefutable. Shanmata means Adi Shankara has established it. Not established, redefined it, clarified it, put in the structure properly. So the Shanmata worship that Swami also mentioned, that has been by Shankara. Then how can he call him a Nirishwaravadi? How can he say he didn't accept Ishvara when he accepted worship? Yeah. So there is no way, okay, you can look upon this that Vedantins are Nirishwaravadis, which is a myth. Some of the modern urban myths. Okay, yeah. Traditionally is never this thing. Yeah. So these are some of the points I wanted to highlight about what Shankara is. And as I said, anything you talk about, Shankara will be less. The another thing is Shankara and yoga. Yes, yoga as an independent means for knowing the truth, he dismissed. He dismissed it. Because it is not samadhi that will give you moksha, it is jnanam. Jnane nevatu kaivalyam. Therefore, that part he dismissed. But yoga as preparation of the mind, he fully accepted. Therefore, it is wrong to think that Shankara did not accept yoga. In fact, he himself is considered to be a great yogi. Some of the highest things that you can do in yoga siddhis is parakaya praveshaha, leaving your body and entering other bodies. Shankara is supposed to have done it. Because when he was having a debate with Mandana Mishra, and Mandana Mishra was losing. His wife, though was an impartial judge, felt that she must support her husband. Therefore, realizing that Shankara has walked off to become a sadhu very early in life, therefore not necessarily experienced in the art of love making, started questioning him about sex. So Shankara asked for time out. This is allowed in debates. He says, give me time to find out about this and come back. So it seems that time he entered a king's body who had just died and then found out everything about sex. Now that may be a story. He may have found out about sex differently also, and I will respect him for that if he has done it. Okay. But the story proves that Parakaya Pravesha, which is supposed to be one of the highest siddhis in yoga, he was capable of. Similarly, Akasha Gamanam, when he came to be at his mother's bedside, he was somewhere in the north, I think Kedar or something, Kedar or Banaras or something, when he received news that his mother is on her deathbed, and he had given her a word, I will be there. So he is supposed to have come there within an hour or so. Those days when there was no flights except human. So as a yogi also, I mean this may be Arthavadas, I don't know. But the very attribution of all this to Shankara shows that he is not really against yoga as a practice. He was only against presenting yoga as a direct means for moksha. That it is not. Which he says in Atma Bodha also. Pakasya varnevat jnanam. Like how for cooking the most important thing is fire. Similarly, for moksha, the most important thing is jnanam. But to get your mind ready, you can use whatever is necessary. All that will come under the field of yoga. So I think these are some of the myths that's going around about what Shankara was or is. I really don't like to talk about him in the past sense, because his teaching really lives through all of us. And another thing is whether Shankara established the Dasanami system of sannyasa. Sannyasa was always there. Where in the Upanishad you have Yajnavalkya going out to become a sannyasi. It is part of the Vedic tradition that the final stage in life is sannyasa. All of us followed it. He only formalized it and regulated it into 10 names. Because if you look at what was by the way, what was Adi Shankara's sannyasi name? Look at it. Brahma Prajnananda, Swami Chinmayananda, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, Chinmayananda Saraswati, Brahmavidananda Saraswati, Tattvavidananda Saraswati, Brahma Vidyananda Saraswati. So like that, where is Shankara's name coming into it? Those days the names were slightly different. It was called, his sannyasi name was, to the name Shankara, that was added Bhagavat Padaha. Shankara Bhagavat Padaha. So just like some of my students called me Ram Mohan, in spite of 20 years of being a sannyasi. So similarly, people call him Shankara, Shankara, Shankara. Though really speaking is Shankara Bhagavat Padaha. Shankara Bhagavat Padaha. Shankara was a name given to him by his parents. Bhagavat Pada was added afterwards. So the Dasanami sannyas exists. There are many sannyasi systems in India, like the Kabir Panthis, the Dasa Sampradaya, Ramdas, Samartha Ramdas, Shivaji's Guru. So the Nath Sampradaya. A lot of sampradayas are there. Okay. So, Shankara just formalized the Dasanami system so that those who are following purely Advaita Vedanta will be organized into this, okay, where the pramana of the Shastra and the teaching methodology of some points of, for example, Adhyaropa Apavada Nyaya being the main one, Chandrashaka Nyaya, Lakshana Vichara, these will be used very efficiently so that the Shabda itself becomes the Pramana. To unfold the vision of the truth, Shabda is the Pramana. And it is Pramana not just because it comes from the Lord, okay? Like in my introduction to Gita, I very often mention this. Gita is Bhagavad Vachanam, therefore Pramanam. Yeah, but Krishna must have said a lot of things. He didn't speak the Gita when he was with Radha, or with Rukmini or Satyabhama for that matter. All that doesn't become Pramana. Pramana depends on what is the subject matter that is there. Is the subject matter available for other Pramanas? Then this is not a Pramana for that. The Shastra is a Pramana because it is the only one that will talk about the truth of what you are, the truth about you and the world and Ishvara. The reality it unfolds. Therefore, it is a Pramana. And of course, since it's talking about the reality behind you, world and God, it has to come from Ishvara, it cannot come from any other source. Because you are talking about the truth of Ishvara itself. Who can reveal the truth of Ishvara but Ishvara himself? So, this Pramana highlighting is what happens in the Shankariya traditions, the Dasanami traditions, compared to the Nath, for example, the Natha Sampradaya, where it is yoga is highlighted, Pramana is there, but the yoga part is highlighted more. So also in the Dasa Sampradaya, yoga is highlighted more. Kabir Panthis, they have their own teaching based on what Kabir said. And a lot of Vedanta is there also in that. And they have a very strict lifestyle. As a sadhu, this lifestyle. As a brahmachari itself, as a student itself, they lead a sadhu lifestyle. So, this is the uniqueness of the Dasanami system. Yeah. Which was just reorganized and put into a structure by Adi Shankara. Ancient tradition of sannyasa, starting from the Veda itself, structured, organized. So that way is a phenomenal organization. Imagine 4 matas in 4 different corners of the country. And sustained teaching available until today. Maybe less, maybe not in public. Maybe only a handful of teachers. But the handful of teachers are there, na? The parampara is kept alive. Otherwise, where would we be? Where would we be? Yeah. Of course, Shankara himself had hundreds of students who became teachers. Okay, we say 4 students, because of that famous Raja Ravi Varma painting. We talk about it as though he had only 4 students. The 4 he put as head of matas. Just because he put them as head of matas doesn't mean that they were the best of his students also. As we know from very different paramparas. Here hundreds of students. All of them, many of them were teachers, great teachers. They kept the parampara growing in their own way. Yeah. So he created lots of teachers. Puja Swamiji has created lots of teachers, traditional teachers. Of course, some setups, the organization comes a little bit this thing, so some parts of the tradition may not be emphasized so much. That's okay. वो तो कली की प्रभाव है, होता है ऐसा. That's why we need to set up our parampara straight and go ahead with it. And I cannot, I mean, there's a lot to say. I can go on and on all night if I'm going to talk about Adi Shankara, but with these few words, and with my salutations to the one of the greatest gurus of all times. Om Tat Sat.